The Soviet Union is able to establish dominance in space exploration and technology in this story by getting to the moon first. 1969, the height of the Cold War. Both superpowers are at each other's throats. They are in an all-fired rush to be the first to put a man on the moon. Yet this time, the Russians take the advantage of being the first on the moon, sending the world a huge live broadcast as they landed. As the Soviet cosmonaut took his first steps upon the lunar surface, he said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Ambien say it was that quote, though, spoken by Neil Armstrong, the American astronaut who spoke those words months before in our reality. The impact of the Soviet moon landing is obvious. With a single trip to the moon, the Soviets are able to overpower the US in the space race. The entire world is now frightened that the Soviets will invade, as their technology is amazing. In the US, first there is shock, but then introspection and a realization that the supposedly invincible nation has been shown to have feet of clay. The myth of American exceptionalism is shattered, and Americans realize that they, just like everyone else in the world, have to face up to the major challenges and problems now confronting mankind. There is a new surge of commitment to scientific and technological innovation on a national scale as the U.S. sets about the task of meeting those challenges head-on. And Harv and I can't imagine what our lives would be like without him. I squeezed her tight. It felt like we'd never have to say goodbye to Dmitri after all. Everywhere in the Third World, in newly independent states, in states moving toward independence, from Central Africa to the Middle East, from peasants and workers in Southeast Asia and the Americas, they look upon us not as idols but as symbols of hope. The hope that somewhere in some country in our resolute victorious continents, your continents victorious in spite of everything, some country stands, some land, states flying the communist flag, some land at long last freed from the terrible yoke of colonialism, some land where a people could rely on its government to defend its vital interests, a land in which its internal and external trade was no longer at the mercy of imperialist exploitation and capitalist profit. In the back rooms in Washington and Moscow, implications of Soviets' moon landing are being studied in much further agreement. Recognition comes from both sides as political progress and direct communication propel into the future as a new era of détente. Yet, in the midst of all this euphoria and celebration, there are warning signs about the future. While the Soviet space coup is an extraordinary technical achievement, it does not mean they are now going to assume world leadership in technology or be anything but a backward country with a backward economy, riven by political, social, and economic secondary contradictions. The United States views defeat as a concept that spurs on new technologies and scientific discoveries. Therefore, the United States, like the Soviet Union, spends a significant amount of their revenue on researching and developing aerospace technology in order to be triumphant over the Soviets in the next space race, and consequently, this causes the Americans to, like the Soviet people, take pride in their nation as Khrushchev intended. Though much has changed since humans voyaged to a curious place in the sky, the legacy of the Soviet moon landing continues to influence peoples. Evidently, people are still people, making decisions for people that didn't ask to go. Why should we judge for why those people which were sent by an American or Russian to explore the world to gain a new point of view or encounter a breath of space on the right half of our brain? Creativity being a mental privilege.